This is a piece of artwork that was commissioned by Keith Hayes, the owner of Plaza Antiques and Collectibles in Lincoln Park, Michigan. He wanted a piece of art that would be a tribute to Detroit and the wonderful people of Detroit, the surrounding area, and some of the special landmarks and features that make Detroit special. I worked for about several weeks putting together the way that this composition would look, and I did it originally on Adobe Illustrator, and we were able to go over the elements, colors, details of it, and come up with the design you see here. The first step I had was painting the background, so painting the blue, faded from a light blue at the top to a darker blue at the bottom, and kind of outlining the whole piece, because everything was going to go over the blue, so I started it off with the blue. I spent some time thinking about how we were going to put this together. Originally we were going to paint it directly on the wall, but in the end I decided that, to propose the idea that we put it on paneling and then attach it to the wall. That way later on down the line you can take the art with him, and someone doesn't just paint over this artwork. Next I started off with yellow, the yellow kind of corn color, maize color. I worked on the cars, which are Tucker torpedoes made by Preston Tucker. He's a famous automaker that was from Lincoln Park. Those cars were made in 1948. From here I started to work on the sun rays that were emitting from the logo in the center, painting all the golden color for that. I also worked on the wheat sheaves coming around either side. And from there I went back to the cars to tighten up all the lines and start filling in the brown. And after I'd worked all through the brown on the cars, then I went back up to the sun rays and used masking tape. You can see in the green, used masking tape so that I could set really tight lines for the sun rays. I painted almost this entire piece sideways. The only thing I did that wasn't sideways was when I worked on the faces and the top parts of the characters and the logo. Everything else I did sideways, which was an interesting work on the brain, I suppose. I moved on to painting the B-24 Liberators, which were bomber planes that were built in Ypsilanti at the Willow Run factories in 1944. They built around 8,000 of these airplanes that were put to use in fighting the Nazis and the Japanese. And then I moved on up to the buildings, painting the buildings, the Renaissance Center.
Detroit Plaza, the world's tallest hotel. With more than 1,400 guest rooms and a huge exhibit hall, the Plaza contains all the services, comforts, and activities one would expect from a great hotel.
The Seven Sisters, which is no longer there, but it was on down the Detroit River. It's a very noticeable landmark. They were knocked down a few years ago. And then the train station, which has been restored recently and is a very famous landmark in Detroit. Painting the little windows on that was tedious, but fun. I then went on to paint the logo, and just took some careful, steady hand to get the font right, and a lot of paying attention, finesse and grace, paint lettering. Of all the things I do, I find lettering to be probably the most challenging. The first of the characters I painted was Chief Pontiac, who was an Odawa war chief, and there's a place in Lincoln Park called Council Point, and at Council Point there is a plaque, and on that plaque it reads, "On April 27th, 1763, Obwandiag, an Odawa who was also called Pontiac, assembled a council of warriors from various tribes near this site. He urged them to fight to maintain control of their land and their way of life. For more than a century, tribes in the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes had allied themselves with different European nations that fought to dominate the Great Lakes. Most favored the French, trading partners who were not very numerous, instead of the British, whose policies and exploding population were a threat to Indian existence. After the French lost the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, the tribes faced a single European power, Britain and its colonies. Their resistance began almost immediately with attacks on posts and forts." Next, I painted Wayne Kramer, the guitarist for the MC5, who went to high school in Lincoln Park. Kramer and guitarist Fred Sonic Smith co-founded the MC5 in 1963 with vocalist Rob Tyner, bassist Michael Davis, and drummer Dennis Thompson joining shortly after. The MC5 became known for their powerful live performances and radical left-wing political stance. The group broke up amid government harassment, poverty, and drug use. For Kramer, this led to several fallow years as he battled drug addiction before returning to an active recording and performing schedule in the 1990s. I was then ready to move on to painting Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks needs no introduction. Parks became an NAACP activist in 1943, participating in several high-profile civil rights campaigns. On December 1, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Parks rejected bus driver James F. Blake's order to vacate a row of 4 seats in the colored section in favor of a white female passenger who had complained to the driver once the white section was filled. Parks was not the first person to resist bus segregation, but the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People believed that she was the best candidate for seeing through a court challenge after her arrest for civil disobedience and violating Alabama segregation laws, and she helped inspire the black community to boycott the Montgomery buses for over a year. The case became bogged down in the state courts, but the federal Montgomery bus lawsuit, Browder v. Gale, resulted in November 1956's decision that bus segregation is unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Rosa Parks lived most of her life in Detroit. After Rosa, I moved on to Henry Ford, who was an American industrialist and business magnate. As the founder of the Ford Motor Company, he is credited as a pioneer in making automobiles affordable for middle-class Americans through the system that came to be known as Fordism. In 1911, he was awarded a patent for the transmission mechanism that would be used in the Ford Model T and other automobiles.
29th birthday of the famous American industrialist. With his wife and son Edsel, the founder of mass production pauses to revisit the scenes of his earlier triumphs. Here, in the very machine shop where he experimented on his first horseless carriage, Mr. Ford turns the pages of history back 50 years to the original Ford car. Today, Henry Ford is doing his biggest job, building bombers for Uncle Sam.
Last but not least, I painted Joseph Louis Barrow, better known as Joe Louis, who was an American professional boxer who competed from 1934 to 1951, nicknamed the Brown Bomber. Louis is widely regarded as one of the greatest and most influential boxers of all time. He reigned as the world heavyweight champion from 1937 until his temporary retirement in 1949. He was victorious in 25 consecutive title defenses, a record for all weight classes. Louis had the longest reign as a champion of any boxer in history, and was a great citizen of Detroit. The thing I needed to concentrate on in this piece of artwork was making sure that the 3 different pieces that this was made out of matched. So I would paint a certain amount of it, and then at a certain point I'd have to put them together and paint them so that the lines matched across the seams. When I had finally finished, Keith came out with his truck and trailer, and we carefully grabbed the pieces that were in my dining room and took it out to his truck, covered it in furniture pads. I then rendezvoused with him out in Lincoln Park at Plaza Antiques and Collectibles, where we put up 2 pieces of 2x4 on either side, and then connected the art to the 2x4s very carefully, and it fit perfectly. I was very grateful that my careful planning had paid off well.